Hey, um, Connor Peel. I don't believe I know Connor. How are you doing, Connor? Welcome. Um, Life is life. It's interesting. Gets more interesting by the minute. Emma!
Hello. Hi, Julie.
How is one of my two favorite classic students?
Wait, who's the other one?
Spencer Clavin.
Oh, fair. I'm good. I am on summer break now, so I'm kind of just chilling.
Aha! So you're going to be working on the TLC Bible, right?
Yeah, probably at some point.
At some point. Okay.
It is on the list of projects I'm working on. I want to work on this summer.
You might also be working on your house, I'm guessing.
I am also working on finishing moving into my house. That is true. We turned in the keys to the apartment this weekend, so I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Okay.
Um,
How's
but there's still a
how's
bunch
being
of
a homeowner?
So far, so good.
You're
We'll see.
wealthy.
They say something big always breaks in the first 6 months, so we'll see.
Please tell me you didn't get a home warranty.
No.
Okay, good. It's a scam. Um, what was I gonna say? Yeah, people. Eh, you'll be fine. Nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah, it'll be fine. We'll
It's
figure it out.
it's all good. So, what's good in life?
Huh? I don't know. I didn't make it onto Father Eric's stream last week, so I'm kind of glad this came up at a time when I could join in. Lately, I've really just been doing a lot of like just hanging around the house trying to, get whatever random. And also, like, this was a really crazy busy year. So I was like really tired after it ended. So I've kind of been recovering from that. I did pass my Greek exam though, so I get to stay in grad school. So that's good.
Yay! Um, so now you can focus on Hebrew, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I should learn Hebrew. I also really want to learn Old Irish.
You want to learn what?
Old Irish.
Old Irish.
Yeah.
Um, why?
Because there's some cool stuff written in it for like early medieval Christianity and stuff.
You're thinking
And
of doing a dissertation?
it's like an interesting language.
Uh-huh. I mean, that would make an interesting dissertation.
It would.
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm not sure if they're educational texts, but there might well be. Um, I have to dig around more. But mostly I found a book at the library and I was like, ooh, this looks really cool.
So you got it?
Um, yeah, so I downloaded it. I mean, it's from the library. We used to have a professor that taught Old Irish, but he went somewhere else.
I forget what school you're in if you feel comfortable doxing yourself.
University of Illinois.
Okay. And what are you thinking about doing once you graduate?
We shall see. There are a lot of moving pieces to that. And I'm really just gonna have to see where God wants me when I graduate in about 3 years.
I
Um,
guarantee you will be where God wants you.
That's the hope. So I might look into like online teaching things. I don't want to do the like chase 1 year positions forever at like schools that don't care about you. So like I'll keep an eye out, and if there's like a really good Catholic school that needs a professor or something like that, where it's like somewhere I'd actually want to teach, then I'll probably go for it. But there are also like online teaching things, and who knows, I might just take a break for a couple years. Finger crossed we'll have a kid by then, so.
My fingers are crossed. May you be blessed with as many children as you can handle. So what I have learned, gathered from friends who have done PhDs and pursued teaching is it's a lot more comfy and easy to get a job at a very good private high school than it is at a college. And from what I've heard, it's both more fulfilling and more lucrative.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that route too.
Yeah, and with classics, I mean, well, how's your Latin?
Good. That's where I started.
So, like, I mean, don't basically all Catholic schools need a Latin teacher?
A good number of them. The problem is, unless it's the like, there are a lot of different kinds of Catholic schools, and the ones that are more Catholic usually pay worse.
Of course. Seminaries also need Latin professors.
Yes, I think that would be fun. Some of my friends think it would be absolutely disgraceful if a seminary had to hire a woman to teach Latin.
Why? Latin is not peculiar to the magisteria of manhood.
Because priests should they should just hire another priest to teach Latin.
Considering
and just teach mediocre Latin.
Okay, considering the absolute shortage of priests, it
is also true.
Doing what priests should be doing, I think that is the most ridiculous idea I have ever heard. Like, I've complained at you about the convent I'm interning at. Like, we would like to get a priest to come in and every once in a while, like, just pray with people. Like,
but it's really hard to get one. Yeah,
it is impossible to find a priest in Los Angeles who has time. Like, getting priests to cover mass on Sundays is apparently really, really difficult.
I can believe it. No, I think there is a pretty good chance of being able to teach at a seminary at some point, and I also think it's important for seminarians to learn how to talk to women. I think this is a skill that not all priests learn.
Did you hear what the Pope said yesterday, which cannot be repeated in polite company?
I have heard some things about that.
I mean, at least some people say it may come from the fact that he's not a native Italian speaker.
It's possible. I've also heard some people say that, like, he just has the normal opinions of an Argentinian man of his age.
That's another thing. But also, did you see that clip about him and female priests?
Yes. I saw some of it, and then I also saw some of the music video that some group made about why women should be able to be priests, and I really think that choosing Call Me Maybe to parody for this thing is like the biggest hit to their own dignity that they possibly could have done. Like, number one, is this 2017? And number two, are you adults?
So on Sunday, I had some people over from this little corner, and we were talking, and somebody sarcastically, I think, asked me if I would rather have Francis be president or Biden and Trump. I was like, yeah, I'll take Francis over Biden and Trump.
I'm trying to decide if he would do a better job as president than he would as Pope. I actually don't think he's doing like a terrible job as Pope.
Well, I mean, this is what I like about the Catholic Church and being a hierarchy is there's just too many people. This is what people don't understand about hierarchies. Like, Francis could be the biggest heretic in the world, right? But if he wants to write the most heretical encyclical in the history of the Catholic Church, it still has to go through a bunch of cardinals.
Yeah. Like that is the good thing about the amount of bureaucracy, I suppose, too. It serves a defensive purpose. And that's also why the Catholic Church moves so slowly on everything ever.
Good. It doesn't get caught up in the fads. So,
Mm-hmm.
do you know the saga of Reform and Conservative Judaism?
Not really.
I'm going to educate you on the saga of Reform and Conservative Judaism because I know there's nothing more interesting to you than like a bunch of Jewish shit.
I mean, I am genuinely interested. Do you know how many random Jewish YouTubers I watch? It's like there are like 4 of them.
Like who?
Well, I guess I mostly watch Miriam on Facebook, but she's a labor and delivery nurse and an Orthodox Jewish woman.
What is this channel?
Having her 5th baby.
Look this up. What's the name of it?
I can't remember her last name because it's
Miriam
really Jewish.
Mary.
It starts with an E and ends with an I.
Okay, and she's a delivery nurse?
She's a labor and delivery nurse.
Let me see if Miriam...
And she talks about like Judaism and baby. What?
Miriam Ezagui?
Yeah, that sounds right.
4.6 thousand subscribers. Okay.
And then on YouTube, there's one person. Oh, what's her name? She talks about like Hasidic Judaism, especially in New York. She's a tour guide, but then she started doing.
Right. Yeah, I think I know that channel.
Yeah, I think she's really interesting, and I think she tends to be pretty like balanced and not. I don't know. Oh, Frida Theisel.
Yeah, I think I've seen that one.
She tends to be pretty informative without being like really like, oh my gosh, look at these crazy people. She's trying to like give more of a balanced take on it, which I appreciate.
I mean, she's definitely very critical of the Orthodox community.
She is a lot of the time, but consistently less than I expected her to be.
I don't think she's blatantly anti-Semitic or anything like that. At the same time, I think she definitely highlights everything that's the worst things about Orthodox Judaism.
I think sometimes she does. I think she's highlighted a lot of good things about Orthodox Judaism too, though.
If you haven't watched the series on Hasidic life by Peter Santinello, I think his name is. It has millions of views, and it was really, really good. He did a bunch, and the one channel that I would say is like definitely the most informative about Judaism in general, and I highly recommend, so I got into a little tiff with useful charts when he did his thing on Judaism.
I remember.
So when I got in contact with him, I recommended he talk to Dr. Henry Abramson. Henry Abramson is really good. He's an academic, PhD historian, and he really does a ton of research and he has a ton of content.
Nice.
Yeah, he's really good. I mean, yeah, I'm a huge fan of it, Henry Abramson. So the saga. By the way, Connor, you're free to jump on the stream if you like. The saga of Reform and Conservative Judaism. So, Reform Judaism started in Germany when a bunch of Jews decided, hey, you know this Protestant Reformation thing? That's beautiful. Let's do that.
That's great. Let's do that. Awesome.
So that's the
Germans.
That's the beginning of reform. And certain people will never, ever, ever allow Reform Jews, especially after the Holocaust, to forget the fact that apparently one Reform rabbi said Berlin is the new Jerusalem. Yeah, that didn't age well.
No.
And so classic Reform was all about, let's get rid of the superstition, let's get rid of like the old language, let's, modernize.
So it really is just Protestantism, but Jewish.
Yes, that's what Reform is. Although they will get very mad if you say that.
Oh, I'm sure.
And
I thought it was newer than that, to be honest.
What?
I thought it was newer than that.
Reform Judaism?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not 500 years old. It's like 200 years old.
Yeah, I thought it was like less than that. I always associated it with like, I guess the Jewish, in my mind, it was like the Jewish version of just fully secularizing Christians who like don't really like call themselves Christian and go to church sometimes, but like don't really do that much stuff. So I think I just had a really inaccurate picture of it.
So Reform, I would couple it with Napoleonic emancipation. What happened was a bunch of Jews were like, hey, we don't have to live in the Jewish community and try, and they wanted to be part of the larger society, right? And so Reform is actually the oldest denomination in Judaism, because before Reform we didn't have denominations. We just Judaism, right? So Reform started in Germany, and in the United States, it was pretty much impossible to live an Orthodox Jewish life because like there was no kosher food. Almost every place said if you don't come into work on Saturdays, you're fired, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there were very few Orthodox Jews in the United States, and Reform is still about 50 to 60% of the Jewish population in the United States go to Reform synagogues, but they don't necessarily believe all of the things. Most of them don't even know what classic Reform thought is, right? They just think, well, I'm not that religious, so I shouldn't go to an Orthodox synagogue. I'll go to a Reform synagogue. But they still think like religious is Orthodox religious, right? So Reform kind of established itself in the United States, but they got into a fight between the people who thought, okay, you're going too far. Let's keep more traditions. And the people who thought, no, let's get rid of more traditions. So they split into reform and conservative. So
Okay.
conservative is a response to reform being too radical, but it's still, I mean, it's what I call unorthodox Judaism. So, and basically, especially with ordination of women, because it took reform about 20 years after, I mean, it took conservative about 20 years after reform started ordaining women to start ordaining women. Like, the joke became, what's the difference between reform and conservative? About 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
That's like what's the difference between a Republican and a Democrat?
About 20 years.
About maybe it's a little longer, but
I see some of that. I don't think that's
it doesn't apply fully, but I have heard it with some things, and I think with some things it kind of tracks. Anyway.
So what's basically happened is reform and conservative has kind of become where a lot of women who would be Orthodox but they want to be rabbis have, you know, they're in conservative Judaism now, because they honestly, if they were men, they would just be Orthodox.
Right.
Right? And like,
what does being ordained as a rabbi actually like give you or mean?
So that's the thing. European rabbinic ordination is kind of sort of modeled, well, it is actually modeled through Christian canon law, because what happened was in the Middle Ages in Europe, the governments wanted to actually have actual, like, okay, so who's the rabbi, you know? And so they started having requirements for rabbinic ordination that were modeled on Catholic priestly ordination.
Right.
But like in more traditional, so the Orthodox Jewish world is kind of split into two camps, what's called modern Orthodox and what's derogatorily called ultra Orthodox. They call themselves Haredi, and I'm actually more from the Haredi camp, which is the weird thing. Like, I'm from the Haredi camp. Yosef and Chezi are from the modern Orthodox camp, but like, an actual Haredi Jew would never be, well, I shouldn't even be talking to you. You're a married woman. Like, you know.
Is it similar to how there are only bad Catholics?
Say that again?
Is it similar to how there are only bad Catholics?
Kind of. I mean, no, there are people, I mean, there was a time when I was living a Haredi lifestyle, and I would definitely minimize any contact with you, because, like, you're a married woman, and I shouldn't be talking to other men's wives. Certainly not casually, right? If we're like, if there's something to talk about or whatever, but like,
right.
Yeah. There was definitely a time when I would minimize my contact with married women, and unmarried women, actually. All Haredi society is really sex segregated. Like, you would be shocked. Somebody asked me, like, you mean after for coffee after services, the men and women don't talk? And it's like, no, you don't understand. In an actual Haredi place, our equivalent of coffee after services, there is a physical wall separating men and women. Like yeah.
So and that's at like weddings and stuff too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that only Haredi or is that modern Orthodox too?
Modern Orthodox, Chazi, to our eternal shame, he had mixed dancing at his wedding.
Oh.
Mixed dancing. So there's a joke.
Okay. See, I thought that was normal Orthodox.
All of Orthodoxy agrees. So the joke in modern Orthodox circles is, you know why mixed dancing is, you know why premarital sex is so bad, right? It could lead to mixed dancing.
Okay, but like Baptists make the same joke.
I get it.
Makes it fair that it leads to dancing at all.
Look, dancing is important, but like mixed dancing is one of the most. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, Jonathan.
Just rescuing you, Jacob, from having a casual conversation with a married woman. Now you can say you're having it with me.
Oh, okay. Mixed dancing. The thing is, it's like clearly something that modern Orthodox people realize, like it's clearly not allowed. Like men and women dancing with each other in public, like no, that's like clearly not allowed. Yet people do it. Laura says, the way I've heard that joke is, why shouldn't you have sex standing up? Because it could lead to dancing. Yeah. And yes, Garth, although I don't generally dance. I'm pretty bad at dancing. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. I thought the divided. I guess the channel I watched the most must be Haredi then.
Most of the channels that are explicitly very, very Jewish tend to be Chabad, and Chabad is Hasidic, which is Haredi. But
okay.
Chabad is very, very not insular as opposed to the rest of Haredi Judaism, which is.
Right. And then does the Sephardic Ashkenazi divide, is that like, can they both still be Chabad?
Yes, and yeah, that's the weird thing, that there are Sephardi Chabadniks. So think of it kind of like within Catholicism, how you have Eastern Rite and Western Rite.
Mm-hmm.
Sephardic and Ashkenazi, it became codified in the 1500s, because what was true was the Jews living in Catholic areas, mostly, and actually not just Catholic, Christian areas, were able to communicate more easily, and the Jews that were living in Muslim lands were communicating more easily. And so there became like two schools of thought when people would ask rabbis and different traditions and stuff, right?
And food and stuff too, obviously.
What?
And food and stuff.
Oh yeah, food. Although nowadays the foods become very, very, very similar, like very mixed. Especially Israeli food, like, is a mix of Ashkenazi and Sephardic food. But there are customs that got codified about 500 years ago in what's called the Code of Jewish Law. So the Code of Jewish Law was written by a Sephardic rabbi, and then a very prominent Ashkenazi rabbi wrote a gloss on the Code of Jewish Law, and now that is considered the Code of Jewish Law, is these two rabbis. And so Rabbi Caro, who wrote the original, was Sephardic, and that's how it got codified. And so that's a whole different divide.
Okay.
But basically, when you talk about Haredi, some people will say, oh, Sephardim never had Haredi and modern Orthodox, but in practice nowadays, you get like, so the Ashkenazi population is much larger, or was much larger than the Sephardic population. Now it's getting so mixed up, especially in Israel. Like the intermarriage rates between Sephardi and Ashkenazi is through the roof. So it's getting really weird. Yeah, and difficult to figure out, because like once you have an intermarried couple, what do they do? What are the kids? You know. Most synagogues do Ashkenazi liturgy, though.
Cool. I've been trying to sort that out. So what does Chabad mean then?
Chabad, okay, so the Hasidic movement started about 300 years ago with the Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, and he had one main student, and his student, so Baal Shem Tov, Maggid of Mezrich, Rabbi Dov Ber of Mezrich, was the main student of the Baal Shem Tov, and then after he died, his students spread out all over, like different places, and they established their different courts. And generally, the courts are known by the city in which his students established themselves. So, like, there are literally hundreds of Hasidic dynasties. There's only a handful of large ones which can trace themselves back to one of the students of the Maggid. And so Chabad traces itself back to Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was one of the students of the Maggid. And he established himself in Lithuania/Eastern Russia, and in the town of Lubavitch. Well, he never was in Lubavitch, but his grandson eventually was in Lubavitch. So that's why it's called Chabad Lubavitch, because the name of the city was Lubavitch. Most Hasidic dynasties are named after the city. Like Satmar is a city in Hungary, right?
Okay.
And no, Satmar does not come from the Saint Mary. People say this all the time. That's not where the word comes from.
I hadn't heard that.
Well, it's used as a slur against Satmar. Lots of people don't like Satmar. Anyway, so Chabad, it refers to the three intellectual faculties in the Kabbalah, Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at, but that's what the name refers to. So it's probably the third or fourth largest Hasidic dynasty, depending on how you count, because there's a lot of people who go to Chabad synagogues who aren't actually Chabad Hasidim. So if you only count Chabad Hasidim, Chabad is probably like maybe in the top 10 of Hasidic dynasties. If you count everybody who goes to a Chabad synagogue, so Breslov is another large Hasidic dynasty. If you count everybody who goes to a Chabad synagogue as a Chabadnik, then maybe Chabad would be the largest Hasidic dynasty. But like Satmar is very, very large, and that's only counting their Hasidim.
I mean, there's only one Orthodox synagogue in Grand Rapids, and it's Chabad.
Yeah.
So they just have the reach.
Right. And like every Orthodox Jew, when they travel, like if you're in China or Japan or like anywhere like that, then you basically have to go to Chabad.
So is Lubavitch is just one of the Hasidic dynasties.
Chabad Lubavitch, yeah, is one of the Hasidic dynasties.
Right, but it's the one that has all the outposts and stuff because it was the Rebbe who sent all those people everywhere.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, Chabad has always been one of the more prominent ones, right? It's always been one of the more prominent ones because it's a direct dynasty from. So, Satmar, for example, right? So, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, he died in in the 70s, I think.
90s, I thought.
No, that's Rabbi.
That's his nephew.
Yeah, Rabbi Yoel died in 1979. So Rabbi Yoel was born in 1887, and his father was the Siget Rebbe. Siget is a city in Hungary, but he was the younger son. So he moved to the city of Satmar and established his own court. Well, his court grew so big. The quote is Hasidim vote with their feet. It became so big that when he died, he only had daughters, and none of his son-in-laws were considered worthy. So his nephew, who had inherited his father's, who was the Siget Rebbe, right? He had inherited the Hasidic court that his older brother had inherited from his father, right? He became the Satmar and the Siget Rebbe, but everybody started calling him the Satmar Rebbe because Satmar was bigger than Siget. See how that works?
Yeah, I see that. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, that's how Hasidic dynasties, Hasidim vote with their feet, and Chabad has always been. I mean, it used to be a lot more localized. Like, you went to the Rebbe who was nearest the city you lived in. Although Chabad always had Hasidim living all over the place who were still Chabad Hasidim, but living near other Hasidic courts. Chabad's always been a bit strange, even within the Hasidic movement, which is why I love it.
They have the detractors.
Oh, they definitely have detractors, yes.
Is that about like being too open to other people?
So that's what a lot of the Haredi will say is Chabad is too. I mean, they will say it's too open. It's too involved with Gentiles. Too involved with the secular world.
Too involved with Kabbalah,
or
too Kabbalistic or too mystical.
The Lithuanians will say they're too open with Kabbalistic teachings to all sorts of people. Like it's not like, I mean, did you read Halachic Man?
No, I don't think I did. I think I came in midstream for that one in the book club and didn't actually read it.
So, I mean, it is a huge, important work. And so the Rav, who comes from a Lithuanian tradition, like he is criticizing Chabad for emphasizing the mystical too much, but it's not like he's not too Mashiach-y. Yes, that people definitely say that. It's not like they don't believe in the Kabbalah of the Arizal. I mean, it's pretty universal. There are, to our great shame, modern Orthodox people who don't believe in the Kabbalah, but it's 99% of Orthodox Jews believe in the Kabbalah of the Arizal. It's very, very few. And I mean, when they come out and publicly proclaim their views, oftentimes they get excommunicated or ostracized in different ways. Like, you can't be the rabbi of any synagogue and openly deny.
But your Discord is okay.
Well, I mean, look, I love Rabbi Yitzhak. If there was a different rabbi willing to be the rabbi of my Discord, who didn't have his, he's not a heretic. he like, it is not heretical to have the beliefs that he has.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly is not.
Which Hasidic group is sort of least Kabbalistic?
No. Hasidism was built on.
Sorry, Haredi. What's the least Kabbalistic Orthodox Jewish group?
The least Kabbalistic Orthodox Jewish group would be, there are groups of Yemenites who claim to, there is a Yemenite community which is pretty Haredi, and they maintain, there have been rabbis, a particular Rabbi Kafech, who lived in Israel, modern Israel, and was part of the chief rabbinate. He was a very prominent and respected rabbi, and he directly espoused beliefs that were, he called the Zohar heretical, right? Mm-hmm. So but he still considered, so there are people who say they are students of Rabbi Kafech. They're known as Dordea. They exist. They're very small and fringy, but you can't say that they're outside of Orthodox Judaism. There are people within modern Orthodoxy who, in hushed tones, behind closed doors, will tell you they believe the Zohar is a forgery or something like that. But other than those people, I am not aware of anybody within Orthodox Judaism. Like, there is no synagogue, and this is what I tell anybody who's like, I don't believe in the Zohar, right? I tell them, which synagogue do you pray at, and what prayer book do they use? And unless they're going to one of the very few Yemenite synagogues in the entire world, there's maybe 10 of them in the entire world, and 8 of them are in Israel. Their prayer book is based on the teachings of the Arizal, because that's what every Jewish prayer book is based on. Nathaniel, I have no clue what you're talking about. Saul with Neil and Rabbi Singer. I know who Rabbi Singer is. I don't know which Saul you're talking about, and I don't know who the Neil you're talking about is. Right. So the Koran Siddur is based on the teachings of the Arizal. Every Siddur. I don't know of a published Siddur that is not Oh, okay. What channel was this in, and who's Neil?
I think Neil's the guy who's been like helping run Friday Morning Nameless with Chad lately.
He was talking with Rabbi Singer.
Assuming it's the same Neil.
I'm gonna guess no.
Might not be.
Gnostic informant.
Gnostic informant. In any case, it was interesting seeing him on there because it was only seeing him on your channel and now Neil's. I have no idea what that channel Gnostic informant is. I mean, Saul knows a lot of stuff. When he's been involved with my Discord many times. I mean, people have had to very much correct some of the things he says. It was actually really funny. Like, he quoted the Zohar, and basically, like, since there's very few people who are qualified on my Discord to actually study Zohar, like, I couldn't refute him. I haven't studied Zohar. And Yosef came in off the top rope with a commentary on the Zohar, right? He's like, no, the Or HaChama says, and I was like, okay, that's Yosef being forced to show that he studied a lot more Zohar than I ever imagined. Then he would obviously publicly proclaim, because you're not supposed to publicly proclaim you do stuff like that. But yeah, he's like, yeah, the Or HaChama says, and I was like, damn. Oh, I get to use my new toy.
Wow. Impressive. So if I'm muted and you play that video, it will unmute me at the end of it, yeah?
Does it?
Yeah, do it again.
No.
No.
No, it will mute you if you are. It
Mute you for the duration.
I mute you
Right.
for the video.
Yeah, I thought I was okay. I didn't realize I wasn't muted ahead of time. Whatever. That's good to know.
If I mute you, you can unmute yourself. But if you mute yourself, I can't unmute you.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I made that myself. I'm
Nice.
so proud of it.
I'm sure it'll come in handy.
So Father Eric, I actually got this from Father Eric. Father Eric did such a good job of like silencing that one troll that came on his stream.
Oh, Dave.
Yeah. Like giving him timeouts for heresy. I gotta learn how to do that.
You have to throw up just enough friction to not make it worth their while to continue, but without like immediately just firing a bazooka and then getting flack for overreacting.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's a deftness to the technique of neutralizing trolls.
Yeah. And I thought having this like to accentuate when I say something might be useful. I also just like it.
I think people may find it incendiary.
It is fun.
I wanted to ask, is there a relationship between, going back to the sort of least and most Kabbalistic Orthodox Jewish groups, like Chabad is known for being very like emotional and like, you know, doing mitzvahs with feeling and connection and love and all that kind of thing. Yeah,
That's Hasidic.
That's Hasidic. Is is there some kind of a Kabbalistic tie-in to that where they sort of get that from Kabbalah versus okay.
Well, the teachings, the way the Baal Shem Tov taught the teachings of the Arizal. So the Arizal lived about 500 years ago. Everybody agrees to the teachings of the Arizal. And the Arizal and the Kabbalists were very adamant that a person should be completely involved in the mitzvot, in what they do. And it, so it's not like the Lithuanians disagree. They disagree with publicly teaching the Kabbalistic concepts behind that. Although what happened in response to the Hasidic movement was the Musar movement. And what has generally happened is Musar teaches similar things about like being emotionally involved. It's just people who are more emotional themselves tend to gravitate towards Hasidic versus Lithuanian. And modern Orthodoxy is mostly Lithuanian, although now there's what's called the Neo-Hasidic movement, so Hasidism is making inroads in modern Orthodoxy, which has been a source of friction as well. But it's not like there's as much disagreement as a lot of people think. Like, there appears to be more disagreement than there actually is when you look under the hood.
I think it's very inside baseball. It's like disagreement between like Jesuits and Dominicans back in the day.
I guess.
I mean,
And now.
And well, yeah, probably still now. Probably now more than ever, but Jesuits and everybody else, frankly.
Well, Georgetown was a Jesuit university, and I was not happy with how they conducted my nephew's graduation.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Did you say
Gotta
was
be
or
honest.
still is?
I didn't realize Georgetown was Catholic for a while.
It's not. It's Jesuit.
No, they're Jesuit. Same with Fordham. Same with any East Coast institution of Jesuit
Most of them.
provenance.
Yeah, on vacation, they had a Jewish student and a Muslim student speak. They didn't have a Christian speak. The student speak.
Ooh, yikes.
And what was that guy's name? Like Butkus or whatever?
Oh, Harrison Butker?
Butker, that's it. His speech would not have gone over well with the faculty at Georgetown.
No, that's why he had to give it at the trad university.
I told Cale Zeldin, hey, if you want to make sure your kids grow up Catholic, send them to Touro University, which is the Haredi university. And like, I would definitely prefer, I think, yeah, and I prefer trad Cath to bad Cath.
I mean, I agree.
Do you really?
Benedictine is somewhere I wouldn't necessarily mind teaching if it came up.
Where?
Benedictine University in Kansas.
But we're not in.
Yeah, the Harrison Butker speech is really interesting because, like if you break it down to inside baseball, there are some things that I don't fully agree with, and I think he took a little too far. But I also kind of feel like all the like Catholic influencers jumping on it is like being too trad are missing the point right now. That like mainstream media got a hold of a real Catholic message and is outraged, and maybe we should back him up a little bit more.
100%.
on the just basic Catholicism parts of it, rather than nitpicking the like 3 things he said that took it too far. I don't know though.
The one thing he said, he overstated the law that went through Congress regarding Zionism and anti-Semitism in education in ways
Ooh,
that
yeah.
he shouldn't have. But the rest of his speech was good enough that I'll give him a pass. He should have anticipated what would have happened and been sure about what he was asserting.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the guy's a 20-something
Football player.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, he also, from what I've heard, he overstated a couple of points of Catholic teaching in a very trad way, in a like and is basically like laying burdens on people if the church does not ask them to bear, basically. And so a lot of people were very up in arms about that. But again, I feel like maybe that's a little bit overreacting in this scenario.
I didn't actually watch his speech. What were the points of contention?
He said something about like there's nothing natural about Catholic birth control, which many people interpreted as being anti-natural family planning.
Interesting. That's weird.
And saying, and therefore, you shouldn't even use methods the church has allowed to like space children and things like that.
Gotcha.
And he said something about like my wife's life began when we got married.
And she had kids.
And she had kids, which a lot of people are very up in arms about.
That's a figure of speech.
Mostly just mainstream stuff. Mostly just mainstream people. And I really think I think that one would have flown if not for the NFP comment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and he also said something about like, I believe that our God, like the God of the Old Testament, has rules for how he wants to be worshipped, which many people have interpreted as being anti-Novus Ordo.
So one of my big points of contention with Catholicism is I think voluntary celibacy is the most unnatural and immoral choice you could possibly make.
I've heard this speech before, yes.
You should do what Jonathan did. Make four human beings.
Listen.
You're trying?
I think she's pleading the fifth, okay?
I'll be sure to tell Colin you two are not having sex nearly enough times to have kids yet.
No.
I have no idea.
These are... We shall see. Maybe in a few months I will have more news on that.
Oh, boy.
May God bless you with as many children as you can handle. But Jacob, you only believe that because you're correct. Perfect time for my new sign. I was wondering if I should make it just 3 seconds, if 5 seconds is too much.
Yeah.
I
saw
think
that one
any
coming
more than 5
100 miles away.
seconds would be too much, but I think it's okay.
5 seconds is fine.
I think 5 seconds is fine.
Now, is that a true nuclear blast or is it just a bomb?
I don't know. I found
A mushroom cloud, I guess.
On Canva, there's I was looking for whatchamacallit, explosions that aren't that aren't copyrighted, and I found the noise myself, the sound, also on a non-copyright thing, and I mixed them together. So there you go.
What a world we live in with copyrighted explosions. Maybe an AI explosion could be generated.
Actually, I think the explosion was a nuclear bomb. Yeah, I think it was. But I don't think the sound is from a nuclear bomb.
No, that doesn't sound right. I mean, I've never heard a nuclear bomb, thank God.
I don't know.
And if I ever do, I probably won't tell you about it.
Actually, H-bomb. Yeah. Hey, Bill. How you doing? Does Khezi have a stream later today?
He asked about it, but I can't go.
Yeah, he's been having trouble like scheduling his Noahide streams.
I guess all the Noahides are too busy.
I'm slogging through the Divine Code. That's a brick of a book. Learning about tree grafting. I mean, come on, it's in the weeds, dare I say.
So this is Rabbi Wiener's, and it's too hard for me. Like this is like for rabbi level stuff, and because I think the Divine Code is the only book. Honestly, Billy, I'm not sure this is a good idea. For Rabbi Wiener's book is a good idea for somebody who's trying to figure out how to live their lives still. Like the Orthodox Jewish community has not gotten its act together with Noahides, unfortunately. And Rabbi Shirky is trying, and I don't know why God did not bless him with better English, but he didn't.
Yeah, but so the Divine Code though is a English translation of the book you just held in your hand, though, right?
Is it?
I thought it was a translation
Oh,
of
yeah, it
Sheva
is.
Mitzvah.
But it's not an exact translation.
Okay, because I can read it and it's dense and it's got a lot of sources, but it does. I mean, you can read it and it's like reading law, and it's parsable, right? Like I get a lot of it.
Yeah.
It's pretty dry sometimes because it gets in the weeds with a lot of what is and what is not.
I think it's abridged of this. It doesn't get into as many weeds as this does.
Yeah, it's got a lot of footnotes.
Well, some of the footnotes, like on here, as far as the question of Shituf, frankly, I hope, first of all, the footnote is just pages and pages and pages. And I hope when the halacha comes down, it will. He says he seems to be of the opinion that shituf is forbidden to Noahides, which I think is arguable, but I'm not one of the people who gets to decide or argue this. Mm-hmm. I was surprised with how he came down on it, but he, I mean, it's pages and pages, and this is the type of things that rabbis fight out in responsa literature, and there is not much responsa literature. So Rabbi, I forget what his name was, when he asked for an approbation from Rabbi Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg, So most rabbis, like Rabbi Goldberg, when they get a book for an approbation, they may skim some of it. They oftentimes give it to one of their students to read to see if there's any problems with it, or anything they should particularly pay attention to. And then they give an approbation. And then once you get one approbation, you can pretty much just give your book with the approbation to a different rabbi, and he'll also give you an approbation. Rabbi Goldberg apparently went through himself and wrote notes on the manuscript, which ended up being put into the footnotes and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the most engagement I have seen from one of the very prominent rabbis. So Rabbi Wiener himself is not a very prominent rabbi, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people who give approbations, those are the more prominent rabbis. There just has not been enough development of scholarly opinion on these things, and there are all kinds of arguments to be made, and it's people are just starting to have these arguments. And it's all your fault.
Yeah, sorry. Hey, well, I was thinking recently that a book that could be written or should be written is sort of like, okay, you've left Christianity or the church for Judaism in the form of Noahide belief or law following. What are sort of what do you have to unlearn versus what can you retain? Like just stuff like Satan isn't some rebellious angel who rules the world. He's an angel that does what God wants. So imagine if you like think through that for a while, and that changes kind of your perspective and worldview, right? But other things like, I don't have another good one off the top of my head, but there's just a series of sort of like this is how Judaism treats this thing that you might have sort of always believed about the Bible, having grown up some kind of a Christian, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be helpful just in terms of what do I retain versus what do I sort of unlearn or have to remind myself that this isn't sort of the metaphysic that I've been raised with.
Right. And so part of the problem there is for many, many years, I mean, the people we have, like Tovia Singer, who actually study what Christians believe, do so as counter-missionaries, arguing against Christianity and trying to show why we reject Christianity so that Jews won't become Christians.
Right. So he's speaking to Jews in public, and then then the Gentiles are watching that, and they're sort of playing along at home, but it's not for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And the leniencies are not always going to be. So those are the examples. Like, what are the things that are like, this is for the Jews, this is not for the Jews, or this is for you and this is not for you? And that the Divine Code goes through a lot of that kind of stuff. And it's not even that it necessarily has to be a definitive thing, but it's more of just, given where we are in 2024, here's the practical, here's kind of what we know today. And here are the areas that we might have to say, okay, there's not decisiveness yet. Like, you could, if you wanted to be sort of safe, you do or do not do these things. Like I'm sort of like I'm past the Christmas tree debacle. Like we can have one. It's a custom decoration or a customary decoration, and like I'm not. It's not worth divorcing over a Christmas tree. I think somebody said once. He's like, if you're gonna divorce over a Christmas tree, don't call me. Like don't email me. Like just stick with the Christmas tree. It's fine. I think that was Toby Singer who said that at one point.
So part of it is also there is a thing of getting socked in, right? Getting a decision from a rabbi who knows what they're talking about for your situation, as opposed to issuing a public document, right? So Rabbi Schulman once intimated as a so he was trying to explain this, and this is the example he gave. There was a Hindu woman in India, living in India, who wanted to go to a parent's funeral, wanted to participate in her parents' funeral, and obviously it was going to be a Hindu funeral, right? So all Rabbi Schulman would say publicly is, the answer I gave her is not something I'm going to publicly issue, right? Which, yeah, he shouldn't. Like, he probably, I am guessing, it's pretty easy to guess, he told her, go ahead and go to your parents' funeral, right? But like, you're telling her she can go to a Hindu ceremony? Like, no, you can't go to a Hindu ceremony. But this is what the Eastern Orthodox call economy, right? Economia. Like, your situation is your situation. Like, you have to live with your parents, your kids, your wife, your neighbors. You have to live where you live within your budget, living your life, right? And the example I constantly have given is that guy who became a Noahide 1 year into a 2-year contract to paint icons on a Eastern Orthodox church's walls. And like, does he continue to do that or not? No. Yeah.
Well, I think that's another good area though to call out where there's sort of the general rule in the abstract that is, particularly, or it can be detailed in particular. And then there is the one-off case for special circumstances, which you can't make. It's not the exception that proves the rule. It can be modified or it can be adapted. But that whole even that whole concept though of having that flexibility is foreign to a lot of Christians. Not all of them, but some, depending on where you come from. Like that whole idea of being like, a rabbi can break the rules or tell you like it's okay for you. And I mean, a lot of people who are raised Christian would lose their minds at that, because it's like, well, what do you mean? This is
Which is the funny part of it, because when you read the Gospels, that's obviously what Jesus is doing over and over again.
You see that, but ironically, Christians don't see that, right?
That's why people come and ask him questions, and he's answering like a rabbi does, like, hey, hold on, this isn't how things work, right? Like the place where he says Anshe Melumada, some Pharisee comes and criticizes him because I think they weren't washing their hands, right, before they were eating, and he totally does one of these. With a quote out of Isaiah, which basically tells them, "Hey, you effing assholes, don't stop stop. These people who don't know any better are coming to hear me speak, like teach them Torah, and you're criticizing them on a minor thing, whereas you should be more careful about embarrassing people and making life hard for them." It's so funny that like Christians don't, because they don't understand that's what Jesus is doing. They don't understand Judaism, and they've been criticizing rabbis in weird ways for thousands of years. Hello, Lance.
Hello. I thought you've, with all the Just Chattings coming on, I figured I would come over here and support the Federici Just Chatting channel.
I checked to make sure you guys were not.
Oh no, you don't have to. You could.
Yeah. No, I don't like people. Whatchamacallit. I don't like the fact that we end up streaming for each other. That's the one thing I really don't like.
Well, and it was just kind of an organic thing. It was excessive and absurd, but it was a thing that just kind of happened organically. And you're right. We shouldn't like be dogging up like 17 hours.
Oh, no. Absolutely the opposite. I am perfectly fine if you guys do a 24-hour stream, and for like just chatting stuff, I'll show up. When I initially talked to PVK about my idea, God knows
the
how
TBN of the TLC.
Yes. I told him we need 3 24/7 channels, so people can switch between them, and like if you don't like what people are talking about on this Just Chatting, you can go to the other Just Chatting.
There you go. So,
I honestly think that if PVK wanted to make it happen, he could, and I think it would actually be very successful.
well, but he's been fired, so we don't have to worry about PVK doing that anymore. Is that correct? I'm teasing.
As long as he says he's not the leader, he's not the leader.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
If he tells me he's not the leader, he's not the leader. Like, I don't go for these contradictions of I want a leader who says he's not the leader. That just doesn't work.
Well, but the thing that has happened around it, like, and by the way, I wanted to your point about the economia and everything else. Like, I think it's a move. I've actually seen that more expansive move even within Protestantism, right? So when we went through seminary, one of the things, and I loved it too because it fit. He's like, don't give people soundbite theology answers. Don't give, like, if you're pastoring to people, don't give them a Bible verse answer. Like, oh, this is your answer, right? Because his point is like, you're dealing with people, and there are other considerations, right? Like there's this, and it is the paradox and all these other sorts of things. And so, what you might say to one person is not what you would say to another person. By the way, the same thing exists in 12-step groups, right? What might be right for one person may not be right for another person. So for example, let's say you have an amends to make, and let's say you stole money from your previous employer, right? And you have a wife and kids, and they rely upon you to survive. And if you end up going to jail, they're in big trouble, right? Well, is there a hard and fast answer for that? The answer is no, right? So for example, there was some guy, I heard his story, and it was eating him alive. Like it was just consuming him, just in terms of the guilt, and he needed to do that. And so he ultimately went ahead and went to his former employer and mentioned it was a governmental situation. He admitted to embezzlement that happened like 8 or 9 years ago. They didn't even know what to do with it. And he walked out of there, by the way, feeling like the weight of the world had been lifted off his shoulders. And he could have very well been put in prison. They actually called him up and they're like, we don't really even know how to deal with this. So just forget about it. Right? Now, I do know that some people, in working with their sponsors, they have decided that, you know what, figure out some other way to do an amend because his family needed him, right? There was no one else who could pick up the slack. And so again, those are just like examples of like what you were talking about, Jacob, that just makes so much sense that with living human beings, there's a lot of different factors. And so the advice I give to you is the advice for you in this moment at this time, right? Because sometimes what might help you, so for example, they tell you to do an amends except when the doing so would injure them or others. You might want to run to your best friend because you slept with his wife. You might want to get that guilt off of you, and you might want to run and tell, you know what I mean? Tell on yourself, but basically ruin the marriage. You know, that may not be, maybe you just need to shut your mouth and not do it again. And you know what I mean? So I'm just saying what you were talking about, Jacob. I really resonated with that. And it's not always the case though. I don't think people get that nuance, right? They think there's just an answer. And then also the economia piece, like it's amazing. Priests will give lots of different people different fasting rules based on their specific situation, like what's best for them, whatever. Like you've just got to, figure things out. You know what I mean? On a very personal level. Now there are these universal things that are out there, but it all plays out in the mess of our lives.
So, I mean, this is what we call in Judaism the authority to bind and loosen on earth as in heaven. Like when proper rabbinic ordination is done to give someone the authority to issue rulings like this, it is called isur veheter, which means to bind and loosen, right? And in reading the Gospels, it is very, very clear to me that that's what Jesus is talking about often. And like, I think your average Protestant finds the idea that a human being, not Jesus, has that ability, despite the fact that obviously it says that the disciples would have such an authority, right? Like, I think the average Protestant finds that idea really problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they don't accept that priestly authority being bound up in the apostles. Although if they believe in a priesthood of all believers, they also don't think that they have the power necessarily either. It's like almost like nobody gets the power.
Mm-hmm.
Well, kind of, but there is binding and loosening, particularly in very charismatic places. Like it breaks down to a very individual sort of level. But go ahead, Emma.
Oh no, I was just agreeing, and I'm just listening.
Oh,
right now.
Okay.
I don't have any.
And that, but what you've mentioned, Jacob, it is like, I mean, that's very difficult, but yet in some ways, even if they don't think about it, they do that, like decisions on whether infant baptism or adult baptism, like there are all these things that are binding and loosing things. And so, one of the curious things I found in like, it's just not even a fight that I have to even think about or get into. So for example, there would be certain, the term, there are pro bros, there are ortho bros, there are Jew bros, there are lots of bros out there doing things, right? But one of the things you'll find certain people is they'll want to say, let's say a priest and your bishop says you don't have to be baptized, you'll just be chrismated and accepted into the church. There'll be some people out there, they'll be like, oh no, you don't have a proper baptism, this isn't this or whatever. It's like, no, my job is to take it to the priest and the bishop, and then they decide for me and my wife, okay, this is what you did, whatever, you're good, you're not good, whatever, and they're going to tell me what to do. And guess what I get to do? I just get to do what they tell me to do, and I'm good.
Yeah. That's where obedience comes in.
hierarchy.
Yeah.
So for
Not
example, when
everything has to be everybody's problem.
Yeah, so I was infant baptized in the Methodist Church. When I went the non-denominational church I was a party of, they believed in adult baptism, and for me to become a part of that church, and then also then be a part of the seminary program I was a part of, I had to become adult baptized, and I didn't even fight with it. Like, I knew my infant baptism was sufficient in the Methodist Church. Like, I didn't need to get any argument about that. But what I understood was, if I'm going to join this group of people, they're saying, hey, this is what we do. You want to join us? And I'm like, okay, yeah. I could have gotten to this big long argument with them about infant baptism versus adult baptism and the confirmation I had in Methodist Church, but I didn't argue with them because I'm like, okay, if I'm going to join this thing, this is what these people hold to and do. So yeah, I'll go ahead and submit to that. Same thing like in 12-step programs. Like, there's a certain program, there's a certain traditions and everything else, and they're like, hey, if you want to join us, this is what we do. I can go in and say, I don't like this one, I don't like that one, and I'm not going to do this one or whatever, but what's the point in that? You know what I mean? There is, Emma, you're right. There is this sense of, like, it's okay that if you're going to join certain groups, you don't have to fight them at every corner and just say, this is what it is.
One of the things I find, like, I don't know why it happened, was I don't know why Christians are so hung up on only getting baptized once, because, like, going to the mikvah on a regular basis is like a huge, like, people were getting baptized daily in Qumran. Like, they had huge baths which they were using constantly, and like, I don't understand how Christianity ended up in a place. I don't even know where it came from, other than the Romans thinking Jews were crazy for bathing so much, which they really did. Like, that people became so opposed. Okay, like, dunk them again. What's the problem?
I think it comes, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes from the understanding of what a sacrament is and how a sacrament works. And also for baptism in particular, it has to do with the fact that it's an initiation sacrament. So there is a sense in which it's like recircumcising or something. Like, you shouldn't be able to do it multiple times, and you shouldn't have to do it multiple times.
Well, I hate to tell you this,
You can't do it more than once.
I know.
You'll start losing more and more, and you eventually.
Well, no, actually, so I know somebody who got circumcised at least 4 times, because he kept on doing. So he got circumcised in a hospital, and then he converted Reform, and then he converted Conservative, and then he converted Orthodox.
I mean, he's just working his way up.
This happens actually a lot. People who convert Reform and then Conservative and then Orthodox, that actually, and then they tend to go, another Orthodox, which is a more stringent one. So it happens, and the ritual bloodletting, like, they don't cut anything off, but they do use one of those diabetics, pinpricks to do a ritual bloodletting each time. So, yeah, bad excuse.
No, but that is what it's tied up. It's the once for all, and it's so on and so forth. And so for me, it's just kind of like, again, whatever tradition you're in, you just do that. So, like, here's the other thing. Like, I didn't worry about it because for example, if I were to get an adult baptism, and people were like, well, hey, your infant baptism was good, your whatever, I'm like, listen, if Jesus is going to get me on some kind of technicality like that, I'm screwed anyway. Like, I just don't think, I don't think that's how it works, right? And so I think there are good reasons if you're in certain traditions and they say once for all or whatever, cool, I can live with that. And, Again, the folks I joined, they don't believe anything other than an adult baptism is sufficient. And if you want to join their church, you have got to get an adult baptism. And I mean, the most Protestant free-form priesthood hall believers, there are a lot of very non-hierarchical like Protestant groups that, man, that baptism thing is there. And so again, that's why I don't know. I just innately realize, like, if I'm going to join a group, like, okay, a group has certain things, and that's okay. And then I also just had enough faith in Jesus. Like, if I was only supposed to do it once, and now I screwed it up because I did it again, it's like, man.
And now
again,
you're going to hell because you got baptized over again.
Right. I wasn't even an Orthodox guy, and I just intuitively knew that was something I didn't have to worry about, But some people do worry about it. God bless them. That's okay. If that's really important to you. But I guess I've just always had this sense that
interesting.
God's not going to get us on technicalities, because if He is, we're in so much trouble. Like, I'm sorry, dude, we are in so much trouble. Because if you think your confession is perfect, if you've ever spent time trying to do a sermon, like if you've ever spent time trying to do a sermon, and you're doing it with all earnestness, and you're trying to get the answer right, by the time you chase yourself around all the commentaries and the differing views of this, that, and everything on virtually almost every verse of the Bible, I mean, seriously, I chased my tail a bit because I did care about what I was going to try and do it. Now, my coverage was this. I know it was a cop-out, but I stole this from my mentor. Anytime before I ever preached or gave a sermon, the first thing I prayed is, Heavenly Father, if ever I speak anything falsely, let it fall away. If I speak any truth, please let it remain. It's those sorts of things. So understanding I was going to speak wrongly about certain things, right? And I was going to get some things right. And I was going to leave it up to God to try and take care of what sticks in people's heart and what doesn't.
Yeah, I've been wondering what it's like to ever be wrong. I hope one day I'll figure it out.
You're the most humble guy I know, Jacob.
Emma, you said something interesting. What's interesting?
What's interesting to me is that, like, I've never been. The concern is not about the person getting rebaptized. Like, the idea that God would send you to hell for getting baptized again has honestly never occurred to me. What it is for the larger economy of sacraments. And, like, rebaptism sends the message that it is possible for a baptism to not be good enough. And we have specific, like, this is what makes a baptism good enough. Like, it's a black and white question. It's a yes or no answer. If your baptism was good enough, you don't need it again. It's more about, I guess, destabilizing the sacraments than it is about, like, the individual person.
But you do realize that, like, John the Baptist's whole thing was people going to the mikvah, getting baptized, right? Tevilah, which is Jewish baptism.
Sure.
For the repentance of sins. And anytime, like, in Judaism, it is it's considered a normal thing to do that if you, like, you go to, like...
Sure, but the Christian sacraments are not the mikvah.
What?
It's not, like, the Christian sacraments are different from the mikvah. They're doing different things. Jesus changed it and set it up differently after John the Baptist.
Did he really?
Yeah, that's the baptism of spirit and fire.
I think Paul changed things after Jesus.
This is definitely a demarcation point where we can agree to disagree, and that is right. And so that's why, again, coming into the Orthodox Church, the beautiful thing is I don't have to make that decision, right? I've explained where I got my baptisms, and it was done in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, blah, blah, blah. And they'll make the determination for me, right? And because I think it is important, right? And the other thing is like, I do believe there are power in sacraments. Like, there's a reason why even on the mikvah and those sorts of things, there's a reason why Jewish people do certain things, because they believe they're valuable and they're important, and they do have meaning in your life and efficacy. So I think that's exactly right, Emma.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, a mikvah, like, going to the mikvah does have, like, it's not like we don't believe. See, this is the thing. Like, I kind of understand the idea of a sacrament in like, okay, so like we have Kiddush, or we have, which is where the Eucharist comes from, or we have Tevilah, which is where baptism comes from, right? But there's a Christian way of looking at it, which I don't really understand.
It's the Greco-Roman mystery religions, syncretism.
What do you mean?
Like that's where the non-Jewish parts come from. The mystery cults and the bread and wine meals and all that kind of stuff. That's the foreign part.
Okay, but so look, I can make I can make Kiddush, right? And nobody loses their mind if I make. Well, you're not supposed to make Kiddush over again, unless somebody, like Father Stephen told me about this one mass per altar per day per priest, right? And it's like, where did that restriction come from? Like, yeah, you're saying it's syncretism, but like, what was it integrating in?
Well, I mean, I don't know the specifics
All of
because
those are just
general
customs
theory.
that have grown out of just like customs that have grown out of practice. They're not necessarily deeply rooted in the theological sense.
But you just said it is. It is
Baptism
part of
is.
theology of.
Baptism is. I don't know if, like, how often you can say Mass is the same. They can come from different things. Baptism is important because it's very important to Christians to have a very defined, like, especially because of, like, the teaching of original sin and things like that, a defined, like, this is where you become a Christian and where original sin is washed away. That needs to be very defined and very visible. Other things are not as important. So it's a lot of different, with baptism specifically, it's a lot of different things sort of coming together all at once.
Yeah, that's how I understand it too. Like the one-time initiation ritual. I mean, confirmation has that same aspect. Marriage is supposed to.
There are pretty good arguments for not separating them, to be honest.
Well, sure, but it's still a singular. It's a separate sacrament that's administered. It's in a singular, unique time. It's not done more than once. Doing them together or not is. You could argue that, sure.
Yeah.
But I think what's maybe more interesting is like, yeah, why don't we take communion once in our lives, or once a year, once a week, once a day, maybe 3 times a day, maybe all the time, right? And so like there's sort of there's an arbitrary line that I think the different church traditions draw.
There is a certain amount of it that is arbitrary because it comes, like, especially with communion at the end of the day, some of it just comes down to the practicality. That's why there are particular rules about how often you can receive communion in a day that really aren't that significant anymore. But there used to be problems with people, I don't know. There used to be problems with people like taking communion outside of Mass, and I don't know, like doing things with it or just like taking up too many resources from the church or something.
Yeah, sure. Lots
like
of abuse
way back, or it was just like a superstitious view of it, and the church was worried about that. I don't know the exact story.
Father Eric celebrates Mass every day, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's normal
priests
for most
have to-
priests.
Priests
That's an
usually
obligation.
celebrate Mass every day.
Catholic priest has to do it every day ordinarily.
Catholics can, I mean, you can go to Mass every day. I don't because my parish's Mass is at 7 a.m. and I'm a wuss, but
I think Father Stevens said they only do Mass on Saturdays and Sundays.
the Orthodox rules are very different.
Mhm.
Mass? What do you, when you're referring to Mass?
Sorry,
Divine liturgy.
Yeah,
Right.
the divine. Yeah, there are divine liturgies happening every day in Orthodox monasteries. They're doing all the services, and if you're a certain larger churches that have, like, let's say if people would show up, you can do a divine liturgy.
Any day.
Now, there's one day out of the year where you don't do divine liturgies, and that's on Holy Friday.
Yeah, Catholics do.
Also,
Yep.
and then also, it's the one time where the Eucharist isn't served. And then there are specific things during Lent. It's called the pre-sanctified. Like, they don't do the same services during Lent. So there are some things there. So again, because I know monasteries are doing, because every day there's the Orthros service, which is the prayer service before the maintenance service, and then there's divine liturgy for the day. Because you can read all this. Like, I try to read the services each day because there are variable parts, and that's kind of how you can follow along with what's happening in the calendar and the cycle. And I like reading. I like reading the liturgies of the day because it's kind of the theology and the time of the year, like all that stuff is embedded in those daily services and so on and so forth. So. But with one thing about a divine liturgy is a priest can't do it alone. There has to be someone else there, and because it's the work of the people. Like, there literally has to be, another person who's there. So if one person shows up for it, the priest can do it, right? But the priest can't just go there on his own and do a divine liturgy.
Yeah, I think the Catholic Church tried to encourage or make it normal to have a public daily mass for that purpose. That might have been a Vatican II era. I want to call
Yeah,
it
and
a
I
reform
think
because I think it's still allowed to do it privately, and there's some sort of reason why it's theologically okay. To your point about the work, Lance, like it's buried in the canon law somewhere.
I have to ask Father Eric about that.
Yeah, there are similarities, but there are some. Now that I've come into it, there are the priesthood in the Catholic Church and the priesthood in the Orthodox Church are quite different. Like, the parallax, like just what they're viewed in kind of their roles and hierarchies and everything else. It's really there are some things that are very similar, but there are some fairly striking differences too.
I don't know, man. You'd have to.
Yeah, I don't know either.
They can get married, but that's a practical difference.
Well, it's just, it isn't hierarchy. So, for example, once you become a priest, you're never going to go up the hierarchy. So, for example, monastics are the ones who become the bishops. And so that's different in the Catholic Church. You can work your way up to priesthood and the cardinal and stuff. So you have that. In terms of, and there is absolution, but there's different things. Like, there are some different nuances that exist. And I'm a church, by the way, I'm in this, but I'm also a church nerd. Like, I find that stuff fascinating. Like, you don't have to know those things. Like, again, like a lot of the stuff we talk about here, there are certain things you don't have. It's okay. You don't have to know those things. Like, if you're showing up and participating, and you're loving your family well, and you're serving your neighbor, and you exhibit all these, blessed are you, O Lord, teach me your commandments. We sing that over and over in every Orthros or Matins. Jacob, like, there's some things you would recognize, right? So there's all these things that are there. And so, but for those of us who are nerds and like to think about those things or whatever, like, it does exist.
I didn't actually consider what the implications are of only having bishops that come from the monastic track. Like, not having bishops who have, I mean, I guess monks do become, like, become pastors of normal parishes, right? Or
Not
is
usually.
that not a thing?
I
It's
don't
not-
think so.
I mean, I'm
Lance.
sure it's possible. Lance would know maybe better, but
Lance?
For what's so
do monks
you're-
become parish priests when necessary or ever?
so there so you can certainly have someone who's a monastic who becomes a parish priest. I think so. For example, you have to be married before you become ordained a priest, right? So like if you want to be married and be a priest before your ordination, you need to be married. After you become ordained, you're going to be single for the rest of your life. So that's one of the things, right? This is a good question for me. I know that I'm just thinking about the lives of certain saints. There are saints on Mount Athos who then went out to preside over churches, so on and so forth or whatever. So I think you can have that. Now, to be fair, I think the hope is that your most, why would you have the monastics be the ones that should be leading up the hierarchy? Well, they should be the ones through their ascetical practices and their lives should be the ones that are, quite frankly, closest to God and everything else. And they should be the ones that should be, a theologian is one who truly prays, and one who truly prays is a theologian. I think from a Orthodox standpoint, in its best sense, I'm not saying this is always the way it works out, right? We're human beings, but in its best sense, your most holy people should be the ones that are making these sorts of decisions, and not the most good at working there. I'm not saying it's Catholicism, but the most apt at with leadership, business leadership skills and management, all that other sort of stuff, like or climbing a hierarchy, so to speak. The other thing is like it should be inverted. Like ultimately, when you would think of the ultimate, whether it be the patriarch or whatever, like they should almost view themselves as like they're at the bottom and everyone else is at the top. So it goes patriarch, bishop, priest, and the people. Like they are there to serve. They're there to serve everyone else. Like they need to view themselves as, I am the lowest and these are the highest, and I'm serving up. Versus a top down, like, hey, I've got the authority and I'm serving down, so to speak. That's in the best sense, that's what it's supposed to look like. But of course, I mean, do things get a little different than the ideal? Yeah. Like, if anybody's interested, if you want to see, because I know some people who watch this, it's the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. It's their digital chant stand. If you go out and find that, they actually have the services for every day. So you can go out and see the maintenance, which is the prayer service before. You can see the divine liturgy. You got the readings of the day. It has the vesperal stuff. So if you're ever curious
nice.
and you want to see what Orthodox are doing on any given day, it's the digital chant stand of the Greek Orthodox Church.
I am not going to dominate the conversation, I swear.
Play it. It's good.
I enjoy that one way too much.
So I'm pretty sure that the Orthodox pull the bishops out of the monastery as a practice, but I don't think it's like a hard requirement, like can never be changed. Like in the same way that
how they'll do it is if they want someone. So if they want someone to, they think someone would be a great bishop or patriarch. What would they do if they're single? They would have them go hang out in a monastic order for a little bit and then come out. So that's how they would do it. They don't say, well, you don't have to be
But if you're
And that's-
married, do they kill your family?
yeah, right.
So
No,
I
I think
totally made jokes about priests like praying for their wife to die so they could become a bishop.
and there might be, and so I think again, like, so there's widows. So for example, there's a priest in Kansas City that when his wife had died, he ended up starting a monastery, and so he was doing that. So of course, those sorts of things could happen very naturally. But at least and I'd be curious. I've heard this on a couple of different instances, so I know that this is like once you become a parish priest, that's what you are, right?
Mhm.
So now you could always go, at some point decide to go join Mount Athos, right? I mean that position, would be there for you, but pretty much like once you're a parish priest, that's kind of what you are. That you've decided that's where you want to be, and
Mhm.
that's your
Mhm.
calling.
Mhm. No, I think the Catholic Church should allow for married priests. I thought that even in a trad cath position.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there is wisdom in unmarried priests, just given um like the life they lead and things like that. I know it's possible, but it seems like it would be very hard on the family.
No doubt.
I know
I
it
mean,
can be hard on the family because my mother-in-law is the daughter of an Anglican bishop, and
Yeah.
she's talked about her experience growing up and her dad never being able to be around because he was always bishoping.
Well, bishoping's
Yeah, and I
different
don't.
than parish priesting too.
Right. Well, and I'd be curious from the rabbis.
Well, he
And
was
the real
parish
thing,
priesting for a long time first.
yeah. So I think that's a real thing, whether you're a vocational, whether you're Paul Vanderklay, right, or whether you're, Orthodox or whatever. I mean, it's a demanding job, and there is a lot of burnout from people, particularly if you
Hmm.
have responsibility over a parish. You have you got to serve all the people, right, and there's all sorts of things to do. There's always something calling you outside of the home, right, to do those things. There's a ton of burnout associated with that. So, and I'm curious from you, from Jacob, from a rabbi's perspective, I would assume that there's a lot of demands on a rabbi to 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 serve the people too.
There
It's a hard
is,
job.
but we actually, it's kind of so one of the reasons. So part of me leaving the Orthodox Jewish community was because it was one part, but it was a part. Was because I was offered a pulpit and I was going to marry someone, and the engagement fell apart. And in addition to being an engagement that falls apart, I also was no longer because it was conditional on being married. So becoming an Orthodox rabbi is kind of, I mean, in the Orthodox Jewish world, until you're married, you're not really considered a full citizen. And then, but what does happen is a lot of the most prominent rabbis end up being people who, for some reason, don't end up having kids, right? Because they have the most time. So the Rebbe never had kids. Famously, at his funeral, somebody said, nobody, never before in history has someone who never had any children left so many orphans. So a lot of the most prominent rabbis end up, usually, although some of them have lots and lots of kids, a lot of them don't have many kids at all. It just, because for whatever reason. So there is kind of that correlation, but the expectation is a rabbi is at least married, because the position of being a rabbi is kind of, it assumes that there's a rebbitzin, that there's the rabbi's wife available to the congregation, to the women, and like it's a dual position. It's not an individual position.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's exactly it. So the presbytera, as they would refer to it in the Orthodox Church, takes on a significant role within the congregation, right? And there's something about, until you've truly lived something, to truly understand something, it's like you don't understand what it's like to be a father with kids until you've had some kids. Like you have some ideas from the outside, but until you've lived it, like you just don't know what you don't know, And there's some great wisdom being someone who is dealing with the same things that most of your parishioners would be dealing with. Like you can really resonate on that sort of level, but there is that role, Jacob, that absolutely exists, which is doesn't have to be there, but is very valuable for a parish life, like real, actual lived parish life, to have a spouse is there. And one of the things that I love, her story is amazing. Matushka Olga out of Alaska was just canonized this year, and she was a priest's wife. And the thing so North American saint, we don't have a ton of North American saints. And what I love about her story is she wasn't a great theologian, right? She didn't have massive education. She didn't come from any sense of privilege or anything like that. But what she did is she cared for her family, her village, her surrounding villages so well, and was so close to God, right? And then there were things that started happening, these certain miracles. And so I love that vision of a very simple life and simple person lived well can become a saint, right? The path of the saint is you don't have to go out and become the greatest known theological scholar on earth, You don't have to go fight in some ecumenical council to win some great debate of the day to become a saint,
Yeah, it's something I've thought about a lot. Just seeing like my husband's family and how it worked and everything. Because like his grandfather was a really good bishop, and his grandmother is everything you could want in a bishop's life, or a bishop's wife. But then like hearing how hard it could be sometimes, I don't know. I feel like there is a lot to be gained from having that experience as a pastor, but I feel like it's also asking a lot of sacrifices from the people around you. And I don't
Absolutely
know what the right answer is. Maybe it's just, a judgment call, and the Orthodox have called one way, and the Catholics, at least for now, have called another way, and maybe it'll change eventually. But
well, I mean, they'd get 10 times the vocations probably, and that would ease the burden when you could have a parish with multiple priests. You'd have less work, right? More hands to go around, so it could be done.
Might. Some say it won't actually change the vocations that much.
Well, let's have an experiment then. I could, that talk is cheap. Shift it up.
Larger parishes have multiple priests. It's good because there's a lot of work, right? I mean, there's a lot of work that goes to it, and there's very specific things only they can do too.
I'm very grateful that ours has 3.
Pardon me?
I'm very grateful that our parish has 3 priests right now.
Well, and then so what happens if, and so clearly there are parishes even in the Orthodox Church that have a single priest. In the Greek Church they call them yayas, but the faithful women, particularly the faithful older women, you want to know where a lot of power resides? Sometimes it's more likely not in every parish council. It's the faithful older women who make sure that people toe the line, but also they're the comfort that comes around and can provide that caring, right? Because there's a lot of caring that has to happen, and there are certain things. Clearly there's confession and other things, but there's just ministry that woman to woman has to happen. You know what I mean? Like there's just like my wife very much speaks about certain things. Like she'd be comfortable with a priest, like let's say confession, but there are certain things that she just is just really mostly comfortable just talking to another woman about, right? And part of that is that only a woman really understands certain things, and that having that in your community is valuable. And so you can you can achieve that by the faithful women in your parish that come around and provide that support. And and within the Catholic Church you have nuns and other things that can come in and fill that gap, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah, all those nuns that come in.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, the Catholic Church has started to push this idea of permanent deacons for married men who are interested in the priesthood. I think you have to be at least 35 years old, though.
You do. I do think growing the permanent diaconate is also a good idea.
But permanent deacons aren't allowed to say mass, right?
No,
right.
No,
Or-
they don't hear confessions either.
they don't hear
Right.
confessions.
Orthodoxy has deacons, and people become deacons, and tonsurists deacons, and become deacons within the church. So that's clearly a defined role.
Deacons also usually still have like normal jobs in addition to their ministry as deacons.
Mhm.
So I don't know when Chazi wants, or if Chazi wants to do his thing. I personally do have to go in like 50 minutes. But
I just wanted to pop in and support you, Jacob. So nice to meet you, Emma. I've watched you
Oh,
before,
yeah.
and good to see you again, Jonathan. And
So long, Lance. You heading over to Grail Country again?
Nice to meet you.
no,
No.
that was an organic thing. I don't have, sometimes I do, but I don't have that much time. See y'all.
Bye.
See you. Go do more.
Yeah, it's always good to have Lance. I am a big fan of
Yeah.
Lance, despite not being a big fan of most of Grail Country.
That's a big crowd, though. They're pretty busy. I think they're probably one of the most active channels in the.
Like-
It does seem like there are a lot of people. I haven't watched a ton of Grail Country. I probably should check them out more. But
Well,
I've heard a lot of other people's opinions of them at this point, so I feel like it's not super fair.
Well, I don't think there's a monolithic Grail Country, but it does tend to skew very orthodox
Yeah.
with some pros and cons.
I know Mark has some very strong opinions.
I do not approve of universalism or anarchism, both of which
Mhm.
seem to be very popular over there. So that's part of my thing. I need to grab some paper. I will be back.
Okay.
Yeah, how come there hasn't been a notable Catholic presence? What do you think, Emma? Like,
Um,
I mean, Father Eric has a
guess
stream.
yeah.
And
I mean, I think
presents?
Catholic
a
presence.
notable Catholic presence.
It's kind of ghettoized into like Father Eric's channel, like his stream.
Well, my Discord has become the unofficial
It really has.
Discord. I suggested to Father Eric that he start his own Discord, and he's like, "Nah, I'm fine with yours."
Yeah, I think splitting the discords anymore would be, I don't know. There are already too many discords.
Oh, there's some comments. This is a funny one. Universalists are the only ones going to heaven. Very good. Yeah, I meant in like TLC. I guess maybe Grail Country, no, because they're Orthodox dominant. And like Father
Yeah.
Eric and Kale, like that's a couple of personalities, but there's not like a sort of stable of sort of Catholic randos who are, um, present company excluded Emma, but like there's not as many of them.
Sorry, Catholics have lives? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they're the only ones, I'm shocked.
I mean, there's a good number of people who like float around and hang out in the comments. Maybe we're not centralized outside of
Well,
Jacob's Discord.
maybe it's
but-
because there's no representation amongst like the real top level hierarchy of the Peterson sphere, right? Like Pajot, Orthodox.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson, nothing.
Elijah's right. Catholics are the only normal people in this corner, confirmed.
Confirmed. That is kind of what it feels like sometimes. It's like that's why we only have our Sunday night stream, because usually we're busy.
Hey, I am totally supportive of it, and to the degree that Catholics feel comfortable being on my Discord, they're welcome. The thing is, it's like it's my Discord, and
Mhm.
I can imagine more serious Catholics not being terribly interested in hearing me make screeds about Paul and the Trinity.
You mostly do that on YouTube, though, not as much in Discord.
I mean, when Paul comes up, like on the Discord,
Well, that's true.
basically everybody knows that like he's not treated like a saint, so that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Are you
Jacob
calling
Gray.
me not a serious Catholic?
No, but you're also the type of Catholic who doesn't get offended when somebody treats somebody you believe to be a saint not like a saint.
Yeah.
Is that bad or good?
That's a good question. Those people would say that it's bad.
I don't know that there's a lot of
The
like.
more serious Catholics would say that it's bad, that I shouldn't stand for such things, that I should leave in a huff.
You're not going to get a lot of sentimental feeling for the Apostle Paul, though. I think in the Catholic Church, right? So there's less like emotional affinity. There's not like there's not a strong devotion to Saint Paul anywhere. Like, you know what I mean? He wasn't the most kind of
Some
teddy bear
individuals
wonderful guy.
probably have it, but I am consistently shocked by how important he is to Protestants.
Well, he wrote most of the Bible.
Yeah, and like
He wrote most of the
that's good.
theology.
He is important.
It's his
but
religion.
like he's the only saint that they'll consider a saint, and it's very weird.
Oh yeah, so I am still considering like just doing a solo stream where I pick the Heidelberg Catechism, the Canons of Dort apart, like actually go
Fun.
through and destroy them. And in there, they just refer to Paul as the apostle.
Well, so I think so does most of Christendom. Like
I think there is a pretty long tradition of that.
yeah, that's an old school.
He's just the apostle.
The apostle.
Yeah.
I mean, Thomas Aquinas has the apostle alongside the philosopher.
Here, I'm gonna play one of my famous clips. As soon as I find it.
Mm. I was
There we
wondering how long it would take you. Oh no.
More details about
Oh, why?
fulfilling the law and how it impacts Gentiles. A lot of that stuff's going to come later because his ministry was not to the Gentiles. And this is a point I want to bring up a few scriptures to make. This is huge.
Jesus
reading
was
Jesus'
not
teaching,
Why
talking.
are you giving Mike Winger screen time?
The new covenant. It's before the new covenant. It sets the stage for the new covenant. Remember when Jesus said in Matthew 15:24, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So that when he heals this non-Israeli woman's concern, then he does so, her daughter needs to get healed. He does so as an exception to the rule that he only goes to the Jews and not the Gentiles. Remember when he sent his disciples out, Matthew 10:5? He tells them, not Matthew 5, Matthew 10:5. I read this one earlier for you, but he tells them, go nowhere among the Gentiles and integrate. So if you want more details about Jesus fulfilling the law and how it impacts Gentiles, a lot of that stuff's going to come later because his ministry was not to the Gentiles. And this is a point I want to bring up a few scriptures to make. This is huge. When I read,
So yeah, it's like Jesus wasn't talking to the Gentiles. Like, forget Jesus. Like, we care about Paul. Jesus, he may have been God, but he wasn't a very good teacher.
I have seen enough of Mike Winger not to listen to anything he says.
Hey, he's got a huge channel. So
I know.
740,000 subscribers.
And it's all, everything I've seen of it is not very well informed. Now, granted, I have mostly watched Trent Horn criticizing him, but
Yeah, you should do your Cannons of Dort stream.
I think that would be interesting, though.
I mean, how much further do I need to go than the first sentence? It's like, here. The first sentence is just pure blasphemy.
Well, you you tend to get stuck, and then you can't keep going. But there's a lot of great there's a lot of great stuff if you just keep moving.
Okay. Very first sentence, article, first point, main point 1, article 1. Since all people have sinned in Adam and have come under the sentence of the curse and eternal death, God would have done no one an injustice if it had been his will to leave the entire human race in sin and under the curse and to condemn them on account of their sin. As the apostle says, the whole world is liable to the condemnation of God. All have sinned and are deprived of the glory of God, and the wages of sin is death. Like, this is just pure blasphemy.
How so?
Oh, before you get into that, though, I have to say, like, reading that, and then you've got this whole CRC faction that's really concerned with, like, below the navel issues, but, like, this is not enough to get them, like, running, screaming from the denomination. Like, I just don't quite understand, like, how they can thread that needle where it's like, oh, this is okay. Cannons of Dort are fine, but, like, we've got to have these, like, pet political issues sorted out.
So, to answer you, I will allow the prophet Ezekiel to rant and rave like you wouldn't believe. The word of the Lord came to me again, saying, what do you mean when you use this proverb concerning the land of Israel, saying, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge? As I live, says the Lord God, you shall no longer use this proverb in Israel. Behold, all souls are mine. The soul of the Father as well as the soul of the Son is mine. The soul who sins shall die. But if a man is just and does what is lawful and right, if he has not eaten on the mountains, nor lifted up his eyes, right, done bad things. If he walked in my statutes and kept my judgments faithfully, he is just. He shall surely live, says the Lord God. If he begets a son who is a robber or a shedder of blood or does any of these bad things, right? He shall surely die. His blood shall be upon him. If, however, he begets a son who sees all the sins which his father has done and he considers but does not do likewise all those horrible things, as he shall not die for the iniquity of his father, he shall surely live. As for his father, because he cruelly oppressed, robbed his brother by violence, and did what is not good among his people, behold, he shall die for his iniquity. Yet you say, why should the son not bear the guilt of the father? Because the son has done what is lawful and right, and has kept all my statutes and observed them, he shall surely live. The soul who sins shall die. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father, nor the father bear the guilt of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. But if a wicked man turns from all his sins, which he has committed, keeps all my statutes, and does what is lawful and right, he shall surely live, he shall not die. None of the transgressions which he has committed shall be remembered against him. Because of the righteousness which he has done, he shall live. Do I have any pleasure at all that the wicked should die, says the Lord God, and not that he should turn from his ways and live? But when a righteous man turns away from his righteousness and commits iniquity, and does according to all the abominations that the wicked man does, shall he live? All the righteousness which he has done shall not be remembered, because of the unfaithfulness of which he is guilty, and the sins which he has committed, because of them he shall die. Yet you say, the way of the Lord is not fair. Hear now, O house of Israel, is it not my way which is fair, and your ways which are not fair? When a righteous man turns away from his righteousness, commits iniquity, and dies in it, it is because of the iniquity which he has done that he dies. Again, when a wicked man turns away from the wickedness which he committed, and does what is lawful and right, he preserves himself alive, because he considers and turns away from all the transgressions which he committed. He shall surely live, he shall not die. Yet the house of Israel says, the ways of the Lord is not fair. O house of Israel, is it not my ways which are fair, and your ways which are not fair? Therefore I will judge you, O house of Israel, everyone according to his ways, says the Lord God. Repent and turn from all your transgressions, so that iniquity will not be your ruin. Cast away from you all the transgressions which you have committed, and get yourself a new heart and a new spirit. For why should you die, O house of Israel? For I have no pleasure in the death of one who dies, says the Lord God. Therefore, turn and live. Ezekiel spends a whole chapter ranting and raving about how the canons of Dort should never be uttered by anyone.
I'm not sure I see the same contradiction you do.
Go back to the canons of Dort.
Since all people have sinned in Adam and have come under the sentence of the curse and eternal death, God would have done no one an injustice if it had been his will to leave the entire human race in sin and under the curse, and to condemn them on account of their sin. Like,
Yeah. No, I see. Yeah.
What?
But I don't know that this is unique to Calvinism or Reformed theology. I
I
think this is
don't
all.
think
This
it
is all
really
of
is.
Christianity, Jacob.
It is
Like,
all of Christianity, but like Christians don't read their Bible. I'm sorry, like the idea that the sins of Adam convict me, like cause me to be considered sinful,
right.
is
You
pure
just get to
blasphemy.
you just get to live with the result of the curse.
Right. I mean, the world was changed as it is changed when I do good or do evil.
Right.
Right?
So is there nothing special about Adam's sin?
It's special. I mean, it's special in that it was at the very beginning, and it changed him physically, and we are physical descendants.
So how come our sins don't have the same level of, don't have the same results?
Because, okay, so this is incredibly important but difficult to understand theological point. There is no necessary correlation between your sins and the results of your sins.
Sure.
Okay.
Right? You make your decisions. That doesn't mean that God is somehow bound to let you follow through. Like, I constantly ask the question, okay, Cain wanted to kill his brother. That was his sin. Why was he capable of killing his brother? That was God's decision. The fact that Abel actually died was God's decision, not Cain's. Cain doesn't decide if Abel gets to live or die.
I mean, I see what you mean. And also, God can make good come of evil.
He does.
He does all the time.
Yeah. What you thought for evil, God has accounted for good.
Yeah. I mean, there is always, within Catholicism, there are a lot of tensions. And Calvinism in particular breaks this tension of, well, it breaks several of them, but especially this concupiscence versus total depravity. It is very different, but in ways that are very hard to describe consciously, and much more come forth, I've decided, in how you live like day to day and how you understand the world. I don't know. It's hard to parse out. And I'm not gonna fully agree with you, but I also don't fully agree with the canons of Dort.
Glad to hear it. Yeah. No, I mean, I think the big thing is to say that God, to describe God as someone. So I asked, I often ask Christians this question, which is, if God wanted you to go to hell, where would you want to go?
That's a contradiction in terms.
Why?
Because God doesn't want anyone to go to hell.
Right. So this is a counterfactual.
That's the same question as can God, or a similar question to, can God make a rock too big for himself to pick up?
Right. I mean, I am talking about a counterfactual because that's not how we view God. But the counterfactual is there to highlight, right? And yeah, I totally agree. Somebody who says that God wants most people to go to hell,
that's not what it said, though.
What? It says God doesn't want anybody to go to hell, and he doesn't. But that
No, that's not what the canons of Dort said.
Oh, hold on. I'm moving way beyond the canons of Dort to try to get to a point to get back, right? But counterfactual, right? Let's say God wanted you to go to hell. Where should you want to go?
I don't think I can answer that question because it is against God's nature.
And I get that answer, and that's the only answer other than, dude, it's God. What God wants is what you should want. Right? And so where God wants me to go, I have to recognize, and yeah, it is a counterfactual. It is a left brain thing to try to bring out focus very much on this idea that God wants what's best for us, and what God wants is right. Now, I don't believe, as Ezekiel clearly says, God does not desire the death of the wicked, right? I do think that despite the fact that that's not his desire, he has given us the capacity
Oh, absolutely.
to make our lives hell.
Absolutely.
What bothers me is that the canons of Dort are saying it would not have been an injustice if God just sent everyone to hell for the sin of Adam.
And I think I agree with that in the I think I agree with that. I think that is technically also what the church teaches. And this is my ongoing problem with Calvinism, is they've taken the smallest and least interesting part of all of it and made it the whole thing.
My problem is it's blasphemy either way. And it's not just, there's a reason I go to Ezekiel, because it's not a single verse. It's like a whole chapter just ranting and railing against this idea of inherited sin. But it's in the 10 Commandments, right? God says, I visit the iniquity of those who hate me onto the 3rd and 4th generation, right? And when you look in the Bible, God says to Cain, who was the first generation, right, that if you do good, it shall be accepted. You don't have to die in. First of all, God doesn't even kill Cain in his own sin, much less in the sin of his parents. This idea of inherited sin is against everything that Judaism has taught from the beginning. And all you have to do is read Genesis. It's the story over and over again of, and yeah, I'm sorry, I think Paul explicitly talks about us inheriting Adam's sin.
Yeah. I think other authors in the New Testament also talk about it, but it's definitely most prominent in Paul. And I will not claim to be capable of defending the doctrine of original sin from scratch right here, right now, on a Tuesday afternoon.
But
I'm not a great theologian.
You have to defend, you have to be a debate bro. If you're not a debate bro, what are you doing on YouTube, bro?
I don't know. I ask myself that question a lot.
Do you even,
what am I doing here,
debate bro? It's okay, Emma. Actually, I think it goes back to what Elijah said. Catholics are
the only normal people.
Why do you call it
a
blasphemy specifically, Jacob?
Because it is imputing injustice to God.
So it's a form of cursing God.
It's you are attributing to God injustice. You are saying God is not just.
And I will also add. Sorry, I'm interrupting him.
Okay.
To pick up Lance's point, I have this issue where I think especially with Calvinist theology, where when I read it, I hear something completely different than what the writer meant because they use the exact same words that Catholics do, but they mean something completely different, and I cannot tell them apart. So it's possible I'm hearing something very different than what is originally meant there.
I mean, how do you? I guess they are trying to quote Paul, and so you guys all have the same language.
Hmm.
Yep. So we're back to Paul's the problem. Okay, 25 more minutes, and then I do have to go and actually pretend to be an adult. Anything we want to talk about in those 25 minutes that's not the canons of Dort?
More interesting.
What is more interesting than the canons of Dort?
A lot of things. Most
More like
things,
cans of
actually.
dorks.
I wonder if I do. I mean, generally, my Calvinist stuff is some of the most popular stuff. Except when Father Stephen comes on, that's always popular because people like Father Stephen.
Well, and it's because there are a lot of Calvinists around here. And so there's a lot of like back and forth, I think.
But not one of them is willing to come on my channel and actually defend their blasphemy.
They probably view you as a bad faith debater or something.
I don't think I'm been bad
Or
faith.
maybe they're just busy.
I think it's hard to explain this, but like you'd have to be like a self-conscious hyper Calvinist to come in and like go full scorched earth debate bro on it, because I think what you'll end up with is the same kind of aw shucks response you get from like PVK or Cedric Parcells, where it's like they'll just kind of hand wave it away at some point, and they're just like, I don't know, I don't think about that part, or like it's really, I don't know, like they just don't want to really defend it, but yet somehow they want to accept it on paper and confess it, and I don't quite get it. Like,
when I've talked to Calvinist friends, I've gotten a lot of like, this is what it sounds like, but that's not really what it's like.
I get so much of that. They're like, "Oh no, you're not understanding it," and it's like, "Well, why don't you?" Well, okay, so
it's like if you believe in occasionalism, that doesn't really change how you operate day to day, right? Like, so there's this disconnect between what you will say in the abstract in terms of a belief structure versus how you're actually going to live your life and what the practical consequences are.
Did Chezi start? Is Chezi also streaming?
He might be.
No, I don't think so.
He is not. What was I gonna say? Oh, that's what I was doing. I was looking for that clip of Jack doing the PVK impression. Where is that clip? You know the clip I'm talking about?
I don't think so.
Where was it? Where was it? Was it in Calvinism? He did it in one of it's a clip of him on my channel, and it was just so hilarious. No, that's not it. It's in Calvinist Disputation. I'm scrolling up in Calvinist disputation and I'm not finding it. Oh, there it is. Okay, here. Yeah. Here. Share this tab.
One of the things I've picked up on it, I'm sure that's one of the things that frustrates you about Paul Vanderklay is that a lot of the times he says things that are like totally non-controversial. And he says, because I'm a Calvinist. And I think, well, no, dude, that's not profound. That's just Christianity. He says, exactly, because Christianity is Calvinist. And it's like, no, dude, like there was a time before Calvin and nobody thought anything different. He says, exactly, we're just doing the right thing all the time. And one of the things I've picked up on it, I'm sure that's one of the things.
I mean, Calvinists do this thing where they retreat. I mean, it's the Mott and Bailey, right? They retreat to a position that is in no way distinguishable from what Catholics believe, and they call
Totally.
that Calvinism.
Yeah, they think that they invented so many things, and they'll call them Reformed distinctives, and it's just like, or what every other monotheistic Abrahamic religion believes. Like, it's totally. I saw it when I went to Kelvin, as an undergraduate for 4 years. They made claim to all these things that did not originate with Protestant.
Every time I talk about the sovereignty of God,
yeah, right.
That like PVK will be, that's very Calvinist of you.
Oh, that's so Kuyperian. It's like, well, I don't know why they decided to like harp on these obvious things that everybody else believes in. Like, there's nothing unique to Calvinism about that. Oh, we like to emphasize it. Okay, to what end? Like, it's ridiculous. Frankly, I mean,
yeah, and so Lance is pointing out, at least, so certainly in our corner, the Eastern Orthodox talk about not original sin, but ancient sin or something, and that's how they interpret Paul, is that Adam's sin corrupted the world and made sin possible, but not that we, or even likely, but not that we are held guilty for the sins of Adam.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, no offense, Lance, but I'm not gonna take the Orthodox word for what Catholics believe in. But I do need to brush up on, I don't know, catechism and stuff.
Chazi, I have to go in 15 minutes, so
I've got to go right now. But thanks
yeah.
Thanks for the chat, y'all. Good to see you.
Yeah, good
Unless
to see you.
there's something Emma wants to talk about, or you want to jump on, Chazi, and talk about, or somebody else wants to jump on and talk about, we're gonna end soon.
Now seems like a pretty good time to end. I need to go eat lunch anyway.
You're going to go eat?
I do need to go eat.
Fine, leave. See if I care.
I mean, I'll wait 15 minutes to see if anyone else jumps on, but
We'll sit here quietly until somebody else jumps on. This is my trick. If you're quiet, then people will feel like they can jump on. But if you if you're talking, then they won't. Sorry, I just had to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people want to get on with that. Maybe it'll attract them.
So I had a gathering of people on Sunday here, and my very, very good friend Jonathan was here, and I noticed how he has a tendency to talk about what he wants to talk about, regardless of whether anybody else is interested. I love Jonathan, by the way, if he ever sees this, which he probably will not. And sometimes I wonder if I do that with conversations. Like, I feel so soothed by the fact that, like, my channel is my channel, and I can say, if you're not interested in what I have to say, you can go.
I think you're pretty good at following where the conversation goes when there are like people, like multiple people on your channel. And of course, when it's just you or you're like driving the conversation, that's how it goes.
I'm a scary, scary monster.
Mm-hmm. Scary sea monster.
I have made people cry on stream before.
I believe it. Have I cried on stream? I don't know if I've cried on stream, but I might have.
I've definitely cried on stream.
I cry easily when I get frustrated, so it's not exactly like an accomplishment.
There are certain stories that whenever I tell them, I have to prepare myself to possibly start crying because, yeah. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories. So, I'm an insurance broker, and I had this 65-year-old woman come in to sign up for Medicare. And we're talking in Spanish. And she's telling me her life story, basically. And she explained how she came from Mexico as a young teenager to the United States. She got married, started having kids, worked at a factory doing work that doesn't require her to know how to read and write because she never learned how to read and write. And she told me how now her kids are grown and she's retiring. So she went and took classes and learned how to read.
Oh, wow.
And she was telling me about how she loves it so much, and she's just been reading book after book after book, and like how great reading is, right? And I just imagine like what that is. Like, I learned how to read at 5.
I was 4.
Yeah. And I'm imagining like how formative reading has been and how important it is in my life. And like, I recently reread Crime and Punishment. So when I was 12, I read Crime and Punishment. And I just loved it so much. You could almost say that like it it became like the formation of how I think about the world, right?
That's how.
And I hadn't read it since I was 12. And I recently, so I'm like, you realize you read it when you were 12, right? And I barely remembered the details, right? So I reread it recently. But just imagine, like, she went all through her life until she was 65 to learn how to read.
Yeah. That's a good story.
Yeah, that one makes me cry every once in a while.
I can see why.
Yeah. So I'll tell you Maimonides. So he wrote an introduction to a certain part of the Mishnah, which then eventually became basically the creedal statement for the 13 principles of Jewish belief, which is the only real creed that we have outside like the Bible, came from this introduction he wrote to his commentary to this part of the Mishnah. Okay? So all of that just to set up how important this analogy is. And he started his entire commentary, right, to that with this analogy. He said, when you first teach a child how to read, you tell him, I'll give you candy if you learn your alphabet, right? And then as he gets older, you'll tell him, I'll give you a coin if you do your homework, right? And then as he gets older, you'll say, I'll buy you nice clothes, or I'll get you, something else. And then as he gets older, you tell him, well, if you do your studies, you'll get a great job, and people will respect you, right? But ultimately, all of that stuff pales in comparison to the actual value of just the wisdom, right? But until the person has come all the way to understand the value of wisdom, right? You can't tell a child, you know what? You should learn your alphabet just for the sake of the wisdom.
It doesn't work quite well.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And that is not to say that we don't. That is not to say that you should then not give the kid the candy or whatever you promised him, right? But that's the analogy which he uses as the foundation for how to interpret everything we believe about the Torah and the afterlife and everything, right? And prophecy. It's we are on the steps of learning more and more, and I guess what Catholics would call sanctification and what Eastern Orthodox would call theosis. Yeah, so that's his analogy.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
Me too. And believe it or not, he wrote his commentary to the entirety of the Mishnah when he was 26.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I'm 26.
He wrote, so the Mishnah is really large. It took me about 2 to 3 years to get through one of the 6 orders. So there are 6 orders of the Mishnah, and just getting through it, like to understand it. And he wrote a commentary on all 6 orders, and I did the easy orders. He did a commentary on the entire 6 orders by the time he was 26 or 27. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it got published. So what happened was he wrote this longhand, and so his family inherited the commentary, and sometime during like as it was being inherited, they split up the 6 orders into 6 different collections, and I believe 2 of the orders are in the British Museum, because of course they are. And I think 3 of them got lost or something along the way. I don't know. But we actually have a lot of his of what we know was his handwriting. And then when they found the Cairo Geniza, so now with computer searching, they've started identifying things in the Geniza that were written by Maimonides.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Do you know about the Cairo Geniza?
I've heard of it. Wait, that's one of those, like, was it one of those mounds
Kind of.
to like bury old texts?
Right. So we bury any text that is and apparently in that community, people, like anything that was written with Hebrew letters, they would bury. And there was a synagogue near Cairo, which was actually a Karaite synagogue apparently. And so instead of actually burying it, like most synagogues have like a bin or a room or something where people can bring things that then need to be buried. Apparently nobody actually bothered to clean out that closet in the synagogue for hundreds of years. So the Cairo Geniza.
Good job.
So in the Cairo Geniza was found sometime in the 19th century, and it contains things all the way back from Maimonides himself.
That's really cool.
And Maimonides lived almost 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get the final word, Emma.
I don't know. It's been fun hanging out. It's been too long since I've been able to jump on one of these. I'm glad I could make it today.
Today's the first day of my classes.
Oh, fun.
Very. I will see you later, Ms. Emma.
See you later.